the name of the wheel. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Martin. Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome,
Hello.
welcome.
Okie dokie. Great. Well, I'll do just a brief kickoff, just because I feel like I'm really
You're
excited.
here, go on.
I'm like excited
Do
to
it.
do it. We have Simona and Sarah who will be with us today to talk about value in much more interesting ways than I can imagine. And I'm very excited to be a fly on the wall in this conversation. Just to set the context for you, Sarah, this week in Kernel, there are two crafted readings. One is entitled Meaning, and the other is entitled Value. And we take a stab at exploring these and trying to figure out through conversation what these words might mean to each other. And it's within that context that this fireside sits, and we're really grateful that you are here for this week. It's the right time to be exploring this in so many different ways, which I know you and Simona were able to do last block. And it is a lot of excitement from how that conversation went that made us think that it would be wonderful to do it again. So thank you for joining. I'll pass it to Simona maybe to kick us off.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vivek. And great to have you here for this one, because I know you missed last one and you were very sad. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Sarah, for accepting our invitation yet again. I am very much looking forward to this conversation, as the last one was incredibly rich in insights and sound bites and just major truths that I think we should continue in that same vein. And I know that last time, so obviously we chatted around June time, and you were just getting ready for the Sotheby's auction, which I think was next day. So I would love for you to give a little bit of an intro about yourself and let us know what has been happening since June. And then we can kind of dive into all of the world-changing, redefining everything vibes.
Yeah, all that. Let's dive into all the everything. Yeah, oh my God, you saying that and I'm like, oh, only like 10 lifetimes in the past 4 or 5 months. So yes, hi everyone, I'm Sarah Zucker. That's Zucker like hooker, not Zucker like fucker, for what it's worth. Confuses people a lot, but that's it. Helpful little mnemonic there. And as all right, shut it down, time out. Okay, sorry.
Love. This is gonna be fantastic.
So yes, hi, I'm Sarah Zucker. I am an artist, a media artist, multidisciplinary artist. For the past 6 years, my specialty has really been the merging of cutting edge digital techniques and vintage analog video techniques. So I come from a long line of analog video artists. There are plenty of folks working with this kind of stuff that I work with, but I'd like to think that I really have established my own signature approach to it all, and sort of unorthodox merging of techniques that shouldn't be merged, and to create sort of this aesthetic universe of my own dimension. Really, I've come over the years. I go by the Sarah Show online. That's been my screen name since about 1996, and it served me well. And as I've been using it to, sort of describe my artistic practice, I've come to realize that each of these little pieces I create are almost like broadcast transmissions, right? I also have a background as a screenwriter. In fact, my entire education was in screenwriting and not visual art, which is sort of interesting. And I really merge this sense of like television and broadcast history, I think, into really what are visions of like personal revelation and techno mysticism and humor, obviously very important to me. Just it's like my own TV channel, right? That's how I've sort of come to view this container that is the Sarah Show, is this television channel from another dimension, and every new piece is a new show or a new broadcast. So that's me. And yeah, as Simona was saying, I auctioned my work at Sotheby's in June as part of Natively Digital, which was the first curated NFT auction at Sotheby's. And then like immediately after that, I auctioned my work at Bonhams as part of Crypto G's, the pioneers of NFT art, which was in conjunction with Super Rare, and was also a curated NFT sale to sort of encapsulate and elevate those of us who are considered the Crypto G's, I guess. You know, those of us who have been defining crypto art since before anyone gave a shit about what it was, and who continue, you know, who continue to be making strides in this space. And yeah, it was a very interesting experience. I probably don't need to tell anyone that, like, when you're the first, you're the guinea pig, right? Like, there's a degree of like, you're agreeing when you're the first to something that it's maybe not going to be the most elegant process yet.
Okay.
That we, you know, and that's part of being an OG, I guess, is like, with all of this, and I'm frequently being asked about this, of like, what was it like back then, Grandma? What was it like back in 2019? It's like, it was not as elegant as it is now, you know? And by that, I mean, all these processes we have, the way OpenSea works, the way we understand auctions, the way collections drop, and all of this is stuff that this small group of us who were playing with this back before all the eyes were on it, we defined this from nothingness. We pulled these best practices out of the ether, so to speak. And it's really that, you know, NFTs are going to have mass cultural implications beyond art. But right now we're in this sort of art phase, and as sort of typically happens throughout culture, artists are the pioneers. Artists are the zany ones who are kind of at the edge of the cliff, peering into the void and going, what do I see down there? Like, I'm going to shine the light so that everyone else can see what's ahead of us, you know, culturally. And so we're still there, right? This is still a small space. It's obviously much bigger than it used to be, but we're still defining best practices every day and defining new ways of doing things every day. So for me personally, since June, the auctions went well for me. But it was definitely a process of like, we as the crypto artists had to work in tandem with these legacy auction houses who were very good at acknowledging like their expertise is not selling NFTs. So right. There was a degree of us dialoguing with them. And already now I feel like I've seen a spate of new auctions. I think Justin Aversano is at Christie's today, and you know, all these new auctions happening a lot this month. And it's funny to see them and go, wow, they figured out a lot since then. It's only been a few months. But as I always say, as both an artist and just a human, you kind of have to be willing to try something and then see what doesn't work in order to figure out what does work. No one can know what's going to work at the beginning of something because no one's ever done it before. So again, these auction processes, like even now they're conducting these auctions in Ethereum. And I think the Sotheby's auction, I think with the auctions I was part of, they accepted cryptocurrency, but the auctions were still conducted in US dollars.
Normal. Yes.
So yes. Even that they figured out, the people who want to collect NFTs are crypto native, and they want to engage with these auctions the way we do in our space. We engage with them in Ethereum value. And so many things have gotten figured out, and I think that's fantastic. For me personally, since that time, that was obviously a huge leveling up in terms of my visibility. I already was pretty visible in the space, but that kind of brought me to a lot of new eyes, and I'm very happy to report that, you know, I've done well for myself, and my art is it's kind of this dream come true. I like pinch myself sometimes where it's like, especially at the beginning for me, the beginning of this crypto art journey, which obviously as an artist, I have a long trajectory of my practice prior to getting involved with NFTs. But at the beginning of crypto art, even then I could see how it was like, oh, it would be easy to mold what I do to this space, that I'd slap an Ethereum logo here, put an Elon Musk there, you know, maybe pretend to be a man, that would help. And I didn't do any of those things because I went, that's not me. I am who I am. I make what I make. What I think I have to offer this world is that I am a unique voice, and I didn't care to alter the voice of my art too much to match the audience, because I knew if I kept doing it, there's a degree of education, and any of us, an artist or a business, you have to expect there to be a certain amount of time where you have to educate your audience why you have value, why what you are offering has value. And yeah, very happy to report I stuck with it long enough that now I think people really do grok what the Sarah show is about and what I make. And I'm excited to see what I'm going to make next. So it's like awesome that other people seem to have that same excitement of like, what's she going to cook up next? That there is inherently a variety to what I do. I saw that early on, how if I had kept it kind of within a certain framework of sameness, that is easier for people to understand. And it's much more collectible at the beginning, because people can instantly go, every type of piece is going to be within this very narrowly defined framework. And I often recommend to people, I'm like, if what is most important to you is making sales right away, you should consider that. Be very consistent. I have developed a consistency that manages to include variety. I have struck a balance for myself where I have allowed for the natural variety of my own creative process, but have found a consistency within that so that people still know they can rely on me to deliver a certain level of quality and a certain type of work, you know, finding consistency within that variety. And so, yeah, I've really hit a great stride, and I am actually releasing a new piece tomorrow on Super Rare that I'm very excited about. That's a lot of fun.
Exciting.
And yeah, it is exciting.
This is one of Sarah's works, by the way, behind me, but it should be in motion. It is called The Illusion of Time.
And that's in your collection, right? You collected that piece.
Of course.
Fabulous.
Naturally. But I love that, because what you were saying earlier about staying true to yourself. And I think the one of the sound bites, and as I say, there were many last time, you were basically saying, you know, crypto in general, and obviously with NFTs for artists, but well beyond art, is a space, or are a space, where self-reliance is rewarded more than anything, right? And it's this shift from what we've been told for so long, that you need to suffer, you need to jump through a million hoops, you need to do this, you need to grind, you need to blah, 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 in order for you to do anything. And with crypto, it switches us into this. And again, you said it's an incredibly self-electing space, right? You, if it is something that you want to do, if there is something that you want to do, or you feel that you would do that very well, you can just put your hand up and say, yeah, I'm going to do that. And you have the pathway to do it, and the tools to do it, and the medium to do it. And so I'd love to explore that a little bit, because that obviously completely shifts what we've been taught for so long. Now, this is the way it goes. And then if you deviate, you're probably going to miss out on all the good stuff.
Yeah,
right?
You know, it's interesting you bring that up. Yesterday I was reading one of 6529's like epic tweet threads about this, that he was musing on the idea of how third parties dominate our life. You know, that in modern society, part of our human evolution and part of our societal evolution has required, as the computing age has sort of taken hold, in order to manage our incredibly vast and complex society, we've had to give away a lot of our agency to these third-party protocols, things like the banks and things like the government and Facebook, social media is a huge one. And I think where a lot of dialogue around this goes awry is it's so easy for us to turn it into a bedtime story where there are good guys and bad guys. It's very easy and it's sort of a facile understanding to go, oh yeah, the banks are bad and Facebook is bad. Those are bad guys. And it's like, you're giving them too much credit, actually, that these third parties are essentially these huge databases, these huge compendiums of data on all of us that are literally just a green light and a red light. Like if you've ever tried to wire money or send money between bank accounts and then they go, nope, sorry, you can only send exactly $2,000 a day or whatever it is. And you're like, this is crazy, actually, that like I am beholden to this completely arbitrary rule that some person, someone decided at some point to put this in place for the sake of managing this very complex system. And it trickles down and completely affects our day-to-day lives. And why I liked 6529's thread is it was really getting people to think about how much of our agency we give over to these third parties. And I guess what I'm saying is they're not governed by big evil overlords. They're governed by managers. Our politicians and society have essentially become managers. They're not as powerful as they used to be. There are no, rulers. There are no kings and queens, really, for the most part, in the first world anymore. Instead, we just have people who are middle management, and then there's no one above them. It's just databases all across the board. And what I think got me excited about, crypto is it's sort of this new paradigm, right? And it does encourage self-sovereignty. And that's incredibly powerful. It's incredibly scary also, but it's incredibly powerful. And I think we're all still in the primordial soup of it and figuring out which way it can all go. As an artist, I can really speak only to my own expertise with it, that there's a lot of talk around, oh, no more gatekeepers. We'll have no more gatekeepers here. And I think it's a really interesting concept, right? Because on the one hand, I agree completely that we no longer have to wait for someone to say, green light, you get to go ahead, red light, you're not good enough, And that's, I think, what we were talking about last time, is how in this space as an artist, there is so much just available to you if you just self-elect, if you just say, yes, I elect to follow my path, I elect to follow my vision and see where it goes and develop it. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it does mean that's open to you in a way that it isn't in this sort of more managed, governed system that we've all been used to, of the IRL world or whatever you want to call it. And but I also would offer the counterpoint that instead of saying do away with the gatekeepers, it's really more about redefining the role of people. It's redefining, because I'm always saying we need more curation in this space. It's helpful. Curation is helpful to people. When it's done effectively, it shouldn't be about green light, red light. It should be about, well, look at this over here. This is what this means. It's about definition. It's about meaning. And we're always going to need people who help contextualize and help provide meaning to what's going on. So I think it's about that. It's about moving away from this system that's sort of all about management and managing people, and more to a system that's about defining things, because people can self-elect, Just what I've been chewing on lately. I'm still parsing it all out myself, what I think about it. But that's what comes up for me, is like, it's not death to the gatekeepers. My feeling on it is like, if you ever get to the point in society where the guillotines are rolling out into the square, you've gone too far. It shouldn't have to come to that. We shouldn't need that, It means we've made some bad choices if we get there. So it's just sort of my thinking on it.
Yeah. And really kind of circling back to, and not necessarily where we're chatting about like removing gatekeepers or the fact that it is a complete, and I completely agree with you in terms of there is a lot of stuff that is just part of the system now in the web as we know it, because it's been that way for so long, right? Those things are calcified. And I think that's one of the things, because I'm seeing in the chat, a lot of people are like, yes, there are kind of saying, yes, there are very big centers of power. And yes, but it also comes with that very calcified web of, let's say, systemic red light, green light, like you said, of just these grids that, because they have been that way for so long, keep you trapped in that grid. And it's one of the things that we also, go into in kernel, where it's this whole idea of an evolution versus a revolution, right? Because revolution will just take the top off of the power thing. And then,
I love that.
And then versus evolve the system out of that calcified state and evolve it into something more. And I think, and I hope that what we're all doing here, and where we are just at the beginning, but we've certainly been making a lot of progress, like you said, since the beginning of NFTs, or since the beginning of crypto and so on, that I am hoping we are in the process of that evolution versus the usual, let's just take this little, change this little piece, but then the rest of it doesn't change. And I will wager, whomever mentioned, I can't remember in the chat about Putin, he comes with that whole system. That whole system hasn't changed since like USSR. Obviously, some people have passed on because we're old, but a lot of the system is there. And just there. Sure. It comes with, it just carries over. Whereas I'm hoping, again, we can essentially go, no, we are redesigning the way these flows work. We're redesigning the way value flows, the way it reaches people, the way it goes between people. And I think, again, with NFTs, and particularly for you as an artist and for a lot of other creators, it's that's the bit that makes the big difference, right? It's that relationship that you have with your collectors, with your audience, with your supporters. It is that, and the way we interact and the way we exchange value and what that value means. Totally. That is the big shift.
Yeah. And look, I can see the chat blowing up, guys. Like, I'm an artist. I'm just letting you know what I've been chewing on. Please don't harass me on Twitter or something, because I a lot of
no.
Like, did I say something that's like, I'm not an expert on Putin, okay? So I really think that what all I'll say about that is, I think it's very easy to give people more credit than they deserve. And when you make people out in this world to be these like evil overlord archons that are controlling everything, they're really middle management. They might be middle management with who've found a choke point of power where they've been able to accumulate exactly this idea of centralized power. I am not saying that doesn't exist. I'm simply saying that in what I've been chewing on lately, there is this opportunity we all have to decalcify those choke points. And that's exciting, right? So it's just all to say, please don't like come, don't flame war me on Twitter or something, because I'm just letting you into my thinking these days. I'm not professing to be an expert on like European geopolitics.
That's like, I think the conversation around empowerment, though, regardless of where you are, whether in Europe or in the States or wherever the hell any one of us is what is incredibly important and appealing about crypto and Ethereum, right? I think it's certainly for me, the fact that everything that it has in its stack can take me from where I am to where I want to be and what I want to do in what is turbo speed compared to what the current systems provide is, again, incredibly, incredibly important. And it's one of the things that, for instance, with NFTs, because this is a big conversation right now, in the olden days of 2017, 2018, and so on, it was very much, even, dare I say, there were very few people who were doing moving images as NFTs. There were static, there were certain type, and that was it. And then now we're seeing this whole, like we're seeing music, and we had a little bit of music at the time as well, but we're seeing this like exploration of what can be done through the medium of NFTs. And I'm wondering where you potentially see that going. Like, how far could we take it? Or what do you feel is a trajectory that you're kind of feeling is in the air?
Sure. Well, it's really boundless. I mean, speaking for myself and my own practice, like I said, I am someone who exists on a certain timeline of what is a long trajectory of video art and media art. And certainly I am at my point on that timeline. And like I said, I merge a lot of techniques that didn't used to be merged in the past. But I really think it was finding a way to edition my work as NFTs to essentially create these virtual objects. That the type of work I do, I was recently speaking with a curator for a major museum, and we were talking about how for them in their acquisitions department, it's always been very difficult to convince the department to acquire video art or what we call time-based media, because there's no object. There's no, and she was telling me that it's like, yeah, the number of times she's received like a bedazzled hard drive from the artist, because as artists, we know it's like, if there's no object, how am I going to get them to buy my work, right? And so on some level for me, NFTs were just as simple as going, this is finally solving a pain point in this tradition I'm a part of, that's a long-standing tradition, which is that there's no object. Okay, well now there's an object. It's a virtual object, but that's essentially what an NFT is. It's an ownable asset. It's a container. So that's where we are right now. And that's why, as you're saying, that's why I joke about 2019 isn't that long ago. But even from the time I got started to now, in these 2.5 years, that has been, and it's still mind-blowing to people. And there's still a degree for me, as someone whose work is primarily in the fourth dimension, is primarily time-based, that I still run up against that sort of like, no, that's important. That's very important for my work, that the still is not the artwork. The still can be used to indicate the artwork, but if you put a still from my work in place of the artwork itself, you have missed the artwork. No, and no disrespect to your backdrop.
Don't look at it, Sarah.
She's
Don't look
trying
at
her
it.
best.
I'm so sorry.
She's trying her best. But it's all to say, to answer your question, that even for me, like within my own practice, it already has me asking myself, I used to be a photographer. So I'm someone who moved into the fourth dimension about 10 years ago. Like I was primarily a photographer for about 10 years. I started working with time-based media right around the rise of the animated GIF, or the reemergence of the animated GIF as a valid form of artistic expression. Now, because of NFTs, because of my experiences in the metaverse, I'm already asking myself, can I go to the fifth dimension? Like, what's next? Where do I go next? And for me, I see a lot of it being a way of tackling installation, the idea of what an art installation is and how it has a spatial relationship. Well, now we have all of these, sort of VR spaces that are not confined to our physical locality. And so that, I think, is going to be huge. I think we're still very much, like I said, in the primordial soup stage of all of that the metaverse is still incredibly nascent. And the ways in which, as an artist, I currently have to display my work in the metaverse, it's still skeuomorphic, right? It's still virtual galleries that look like a physical gallery. I think what we're going to start to see is there's a point just past this phase where we will realize we don't have to make virtual galleries look the way physical galleries do. And it's not to say there isn't some of that already, of course, but that's what I'm excited for, is that's ours to define. And you know, I often tell people, like, beyond the scope of just art, beyond the scope of what I myself do, anything that we currently call intellectual property will be touched by NFTs in the future, which is why it's very funny to me, maybe not funny, haha, but it's like curious to me how there's a current spate of other creatives, like whether they're writers or what, you know, whatever discipline they have, on Twitter roasting NFTs because the hacky joke of like, oh, I could just right click and save as. It's so easy to just steal that work, so why wouldn't I just steal it? And you want to go, how would you feel if someone did that with your writing? How would you feel if someone made a TV show of something you wrote just completely, because they could copy and paste your text,
yeah,
and didn't compensate? No one would ever do that. You know what I mean? Like in media law, you simply couldn't go and copy and paste someone's Twitter and then go, this is our new TV show, it's this person's Twitter. We didn't compensate them because we could copy and paste it. So what does it matter? And it's like, well, that's called plagiarism. And we have intellectual property laws. The same is true of artwork. I guess what I'll say is, it's not that it's funny, it's that to me, it reveals just how traumatized artists and creative people are as a class. And just historically, that there is such division between us because we've always been pitted against each other in the past models. We were always sort of so far down the hierarchy of business. You know, my spouse works for like a tech company and has told me how disheartening it can be when you realize how far down the levels of power that creative people are and how disposable they're seen as being. And I myself experienced that prior to NFTs. There's nothing like getting a deck, you know, that has like your artwork in it as the inspiration. And you realize that the deck they sent you is essentially a threat of, you'll either do this for the price we want, or we'll find someone else who will do what you do for less money, who will take your artwork and copy it for less money. And so I think that's really interesting. And it's one of those where you're like, ooh, that's gonna age like bad cheese. You know what I mean? Like, that's a take. People gloating about NFTs are so stupid because I could just steal digital art. And it's like, yeah, you could just steal anyone's intellectual property. Doesn't mean you should, and it doesn't mean there won't be repercussions for plagiarizing or using something in an unauthorized commercial manner.
It's my favorite. It's like my favorite argument. The same with crypto as well. It's like, oh, it's being used for so many nefarious things to buy, like drugs and guns. It's like, so is the US dollar.
Right,
for
so are dollars. Right. It's definitely, I don't want to say it's always a bad faith argument. I think it sometimes just comes from, you know, there's a lot of fear mongering, especially like the, you know, in the news media and stuff. There's fear around what people don't understand. And so even that, I don't want to give that the power to say, oh, they're fear mongering because it's about crowd control and blah, blah, blah. No, it's actually just simpler than that. Things people don't understand, things that are new that make someone feel out of touch. It's a human survival response to be afraid, to go, that's new. That might be a predator. That might eat me. Cryptocurrency might invalidate my way of life. I'm terrified. Therefore, shut it all down. I hate it. That's like what we're seeing left and right.
What was that quote as well? Was it Upton Sinclair that basically said, what was it? A man won't understand what you're talking about if his salary depends on him not understanding it.
That's great. That's exactly it. It's that thing of, I think it's like you're very well served, especially if you want to keep doing this stuff. And there are these waves of like anger that emerge every couple months where all of a sudden you're like, uh-oh, the normies got wind of what we're doing and they're mad about it. It's like, if you want to keep going and not let that sort of stop you, is you I don't think you necessarily are well served to try to change the mind of someone who's coming at you with a bad faith argument or with violence. I have had to learn that this year, when it's like, learn to distinguish between someone who wishes you harm versus someone who's just afraid and what you're doing is upsetting them. But there is a meaningful dialogue that can happen. And it's like sort of the only way through.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on this just because I know you described it first as kind of like individual trauma for people over long periods of time that we're trying to work through. Then you've now touched on the normal state of discourse, which is kind of like outrage on Twitter. How do you sense that we get past this tendency to compete, especially under these higher stakes situations, towards environments of collaborations, environments where envy and fear and distrust do not represent the norms, and that trust can be rebuilt? What does that look like to you? Because it feels to me that that's pretty much the most important question left for the NFT space overall. It's not that the technology is not going to continue to evolve and that people aren't going to keep launching really cool projects. It's that a lot of people will be left feeling hurt, and that's what is left for us to reflect on how to avoid. So I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. I think my instinct is that because of human nature, it'll never be avoided entirely. But what it brings up for me is what I've already seen of the difference in the community of artists that are involved with NFTs versus the greater community of artists that I've been a part of for, a decade or so, the other artists I'm connected with who have not gotten involved in this. And as I go further and further down the rabbit hole with NFTs, that contrast becomes that much more visible to me. As we have a saying in this space, we're all going to make it. And that to me is like, as funny as it is, as much as it's a meme, the beauty of memes is they actually are, they're like our religion almost. They're our religious iconography right now of like this shared spiritual connection of this space. Is we're all going to make it is something I have seen in my fellow artists in this space. Everyone's at a different level, right? And I every day I feel like I'm engaging with people and trying to root people on and go, listen, it took me like almost 2 years to even be supporting myself from what I'm doing here. Like I was just having that conversation with someone this morning that it's like, don't put the pressure on this to be successful immediately for you, because that's how you're going to get burnt out. Like my wife joked that I'm her startup. Like she was like, I was pre-revenue for a while before it became something that was like actually what I'm doing with my life in a way that I could say no to other work. And the idea of we're all going to make it, especially among artists, like there is so much, not only a lack of competition, that you recognize holistically when you support other artists in the space, lift them up, retweet their work, tell people about their work, buy their work, share their work, you are holistically rewarded for that. That community building is something as an artist you will see actual, tangible reward from in a way that will benefit your life. And those are the people who get it. The people who get we're all going to make it realize it really is true in this space that the rising tide raises all ships. And, in these spaces where NFTs are not what people are doing, where people are still doing their creative practices in this sort of older model, I am often struck, and it's a painful reminder of how meager the offerings are for artists in our communities, that like everyone is competing for these like 5 grants that might offer them a lower middle class income for a year. Like there are like 5 grants that basically at least in the United States will give artists enough money to barely live on for a year, and you have like hundreds of thousands of artists competing for these grants. And then, you know, artists who are able to edition or sell their work, that is such a small group of people. It's often, it's like an unspoken rule that they have to have gone to certain art schools. They have to have a certain pedigree to even get access to the galleries, to even get access to the auction houses, to have their work be deemed saleable. So for the vast, vast majority of other artists and creative people who do not have those pedigrees, do not have those connections, they can't really sell their work in a meaningful way. So they're competing for these grants. And it's that when especially earlier this year, when there was the big wave of backlash against NFTs, sort of around these misunderstood ecological concerns, not that there aren't ecological concerns. I do feel that a lot of the anger that emerged was based on erroneous logic, and based on a thinking that, again, like I was saying, was looking for the bedtime story of everyone's worried about climate change. We're all upset about it. People want to be able to go, it's them, it's the people making NFTs. They're the ones burning the earth. Get them off with their heads. That'll solve it. And that's what I mean by it was sort of a bad faith argument there a little bit. And there was, for me, my experience was that it was a lot of artists, and it still is a lot of artists and creative people who are perpetuating this violence masquerading as activism. And this is what I was saying about, I think you're best served to recognize people do not come after you if they themselves have something worth protecting and worth growing. That it's desperation that causes people to be violent like that, to be violent in their thinking, to see blood in the streets. You know, that's what I was sort of joking about earlier, of like, if you get to the point that we have to roll the guillotines out, it means you weren't listening to people. That you need to listen to these concerns before they become so desperate that they resort to violence. And to sort of, in a roundabout way, to answer your question, at least within the space itself, the only way we're ever going to make there not be that feeling of us versus them and that sense of division is great effort has to be put towards distributing prosperity and making sure this sense of, and this is what 6529's, I keep pushing up glasses I'm not wearing. Don't mind me. I guess I have a tick. The thing 6529 was saying that really resonated with me was this idea of choke points. And what it brought up for me was it's not just choke points of power, it's choke points of prosperity. That is what all of us throughout the world, we recognize the world is so abundant that the idea of an economy, the idea of money is a human construct that we could absolutely just decide to think of differently. And that's what crypto is. We just went, hey, this thing that was invented in the Middle Ages, this currency thing, what if we finally evolve it to match our borderless world a little better so that it works for us in this new networked way that humans exist? Because we've been using currency that was designed at a time that was very feudal and tribal. And
it's a unit of measure, right? It's like saying value is only money, as if, you know, the sun rises because it's 6 a.m. That's why it happens, right?
Right.
Or like I go to the restaurant to eat the menu, not the food.
Yeah, it's like, so what I see a lot of people in this space attempting to do, and it's not even about attempting, it's organically happening. And it's what I see, at least, again, what I can speak to, my expertise is specifically among artists and creative people, is this degree of the prosperity being loosened up so that prosperity and abundance itself is being organically distributed out more to people who their entire lives have gone, I have had to fight like a rat in the street with other artists to try to get my little nibble of cheese. It was always difficult. And now there is this like, oh, I'm finally getting I'm finally getting what a person is due. I'm finally getting what is a humane amount of prosperity, and I didn't have to fight so hard for it. And other people are supporting it. And it's just this web. And that's what I mean by like, it can never be, not that it can never be, it's just that any of our saying things like, well, end poverty, end world hunger. And it's like, duh, like, yes, duh. I don't think anyone disagrees with that as a concept, but how? You're not going to ever like sell enough organic t-shirts that say save the whales to like make it happen. That's a misguided virtue signaling attempt at solving issues that really can only be solved by meaningful internal organic shifts of global systems. And that is why cryptocurrency is exciting. And that is why when people are so set against it, it's like you're fighting against your own liberation here. Like, don't do that. Like, we're trying to make this better for everybody. Our intentions really, I can't speak for everyone in this space, but I think the philosophy behind what we're doing here on a more holistic level has intentions that are philanthropic and has intentions that are for the good of humanity and for the good of the earth itself and the climate and all of it. So when you get attacked, it's a little bit of people, they're being too granular about, they see this one little thing that it's inelegant right now, that we have to use the tools of today, like carbon extractive energy technologies. We have to use the tools of today to build the tools of tomorrow. And people are sort of like throwing rocks at it as we're building it, being like, no, no, no. And it's like, don't you understand though? We're trying to make everything better for everybody. Please just stop throwing rocks at us.
But then it's like the classic thing, right? Any innovation comes with that little side of pitchfork where it's like, I don't think so. This is weird. And this is what happened with digital art, didn't it? When computers first started, it was like really bad.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that the history of digital art and like computer-based art is incredibly violent. There was a lot of backlash in the 60s and 70s. Like digital artists, if they put on a show, they had to fear for their physical safety. I think people also don't realize how much digital art, like women are a huge part of the story of digital art and of computing, like all the way back to Ada Lovelace. You know what I mean? It's a funny discussion whenever I see it come up now. Where are all the women in crypto? Where are all the women in computers? It's like, you mean we like kind of really were a huge part of inventing all of this. Like, and computers themselves evolved out of looms. There's nothing more in the canon of female activity than weaving. So it's sort of like, I know I'm going off on a tangent, but it's all as I will. But it's all to say that, yeah, there is this sort of degree always of rabble, you know, of people missing the forest for the trees.
Very true. Very true. We have 9 minutes and there's a couple of questions that we can like fire through real quick. What do we have? Question: the medium is the message. How does crypto as a change in medium change the artist's message?
Ooh.
And Sarah, just so you know,
Marshall McLuhan in there.
There's probably like 4 or 5 good ones in Q&A. I know we don't have that much time. Yeah.
Well, I'm down to answer them if you guys are, so I'll try to be succinct. Yeah.
I think that one is probably a good place to start because I'm really curious what you think about that.
We've chatted about that before with the container.
I love, first off, I love just the medium is the message as obviously like media theory quote. I also love to be a little bit of like a trickster Bugs Bunny about it and go, I think it's 100% true. And I also think it's 100% not true. And what I mean by that in my case, right, is I'm so associated with my medium, which is VHS art. And I like to sometimes point out to people just as like a way of keeping your thinking holistic and open-minded is that's incredibly reductive. Reducing an artist's work to their medium can be, it's like saying, okay, well, Caravaggio was a painter and so was, you know, I don't know, Rothko. Their work has to just go, oh, they just do painting. It's like, well, but these are very, very, very different, you know, eras and thinkings, and they reflect their times and all these things. You can't just say, oh, it's just painting. And I think the same is true for me. If you were to go, oh, it's just VHS art, which of course I've always had to, like, there is that trick as an artist, you have to market yourself a little bit. And it's good to have that quick little nugget to make people understand, oh, if you see it and it's VHS art and it looks like it's, you know, from on a VHS tape, Sarah probably made it, that's helpful. But I also like to point out to people, in my case anyway, and I would say this is probably the case with most artists that people really like sink their teeth into, is because there's so much there beyond the medium. I like to say it's the witch, not the wand, right? It's like the tool I create the art with does not create the art. I, the witch, create the art. And that's what gets people excited. It's the energy and the voice. Having said all that, now I will answer why, yes, the medium is the message, especially when it comes to NFTs, because I'd like to think my work is an excellent example. I have this long history of art I created prior to NFTs that was created for the medium of internet, the medium of sharing, you know, that I have almost 7 billion views of my GIFs on Giphy. And that's intentional, that I've always created my work with the idea of the feedback loop of it must be put out there, it must be disseminated. Long before I knew how to make any money from it, I was seeking ways to disseminate it. And now, as I kind of was saying this at the very beginning of our chat, that you know, it's up to each artist to decide how much they want to cater to the market. The activity of minting your work as NFTs is a market endeavor. You are entering a market, an art market. And I think it's important for people to remember that and having an artistic practice are two completely separate things. I always say I'm both my inner child and my babysitter. The inner child creates all the art, plays, is fun and fancy free. And then the babysitter puts on the businesswoman hat and shoulder pads and goes, okay, how are we selling this? Who are we talking to? Like, let's get it done. And, you know, because I can't, if I think that way when I'm creating the art, in my case, that would sully the artwork. That's how I would end up with Ethereum logos and Elon Musk's. And because if the businesswoman creates the art ends up just being about, well, how do I sell this? And for me personally, that is not what I want my art to be about. And for everyone, you have to ask yourself that question. Are you just trying to make money? That's okay if you are. I'm not knocking that. But you have to find the right equation for yourself of how much of this is about finding financial support for myself and how much of this is about disseminating my work and finishing that feedback loop of I want my work to find an audience and I want my work to expand and to grow. I've been musing on it a lot lately, how it's like most of us who are artists because we find our own existential dread so unbearable that we are compulsive in our need to make a mark, to go, I need to prove to people that I exist and that long after I'm gone, prove to those people that I once did exist. And that is why I create. And, you know,
I love it. I love it.
So the beauty of NFTs and blockchain for me, of course, there is the aspect of it's a market, it's for sales. But beyond that, what was always the siren song for me is like, I'm finally putting my work somewhere where it can last forever. And maybe that sounds a touch narcissistic. Maybe you have to be a touch narcissistic to be an artist.
Like that forever.
Yeah, forever. And granted, this is again why I say we need curators. There are plenty of curators on Twitter who, if they heard me saying this, would go, but Sarah, it won't last forever. IPFS isn't forever. Right. And what if you end up with a broken link? And thank God for those people. We need to support those people because they're the ones who are doing the real dirty work of making sure these pretty things we're putting out there do stand the test of time.
Endure. Yes.
Will endure. And so it's all to say, for me, and I can really only speak for myself, the medium is the message, in the sense that by creating the work as an NFT, I have watched over this past 2.5 years, it has crystallized my work into almost like a diamond. It has like caused a feedback loop where, for me, it's less about how do I make sure it sells to people, though that's an aspect of it. It's more about recognizing what really like lands with people and what doesn't really, what's not really, what didn't cook right, you know what I mean, or like didn't quite come together right. And through that feedback loop of what gets people excited and talking and potentially buying, versus what doesn't. And that, with any artist, you know, whether it's NFTs or it used to be Tumblr for me, sort of had the same feedback loop of, if it got a lot of notes, I was like, oh, people really like that. I'm okay. You know, next time I'm in the studio, I'll keep with that. Yes.
Just quickly, because we're super running out of time. And there's one question about somebody who is doing a Sotheby's auction. Who was that? And if you had any
That's
tips.
me.
Oh, hello. If you had any tips. I'm trying to find it.
Yep.
Do you want to just ask it real quick?
Go ahead, Mark.
Me ask? Oh, I mean, so we're doing a drop actually in collaboration with Kobe Bryant's foundation. So we're going to be doing a and this isn't public knowledge yet, so I guess you guys are getting the scoop. One of Kobe Bryant's championship.
No more alpha, because I think it's being broadcast. So shh.
Well, we're doing a drop.
Okay.
We're doing a drop, and we're going to be doing it through Sotheby's. Not sure exact timeline, probably this month or next, but basically any advice for, because it seems like you've done your own NFT auctions. Congratulations, Sarah. I think that's really awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
But any advice for anyone else that otherwise would be doing a drop through Christie's or Sotheby's would be super valuable.
My advice would be, obviously be respectful to them. They are experts at selling art, but also recognize that you probably also have your own expertise, and honor that, and be prepared to really lead the way in terms of publicity and in terms of drumming up interest, because they know how to speak to traditional collectors, but we know how to speak to NFT collectors. And my experience, and again, like I said, I can tell already they've learned a lot from us since June when I did my auction. You know, it's in no way to criticize them. Like I said, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. But it's that of like, don't be afraid to set the pace and the tone for your auction. Especially if you've been selling NFTs and you have a rhythm with it.
Yeah, so we're just
and honor that.
So we're more or less, I mean, we've been selling a different kind of NFT for a while, but like this is going to be a unique drop for us. So this is uncharted territory.
Then I think the best thing I can say is, again, use what knowledge and experience you have, and trust in that and what's been effective. But then if it really is like experimental for you and experimental for them, acknowledge that it's you're being brave. You're walking into the darkness, and just listen to feedback, listen to how people are responding to it. Because you don't know until you get there how it's going to be received. And that's the terror that every person working in NFTs, that's what we juggle every day is, I'm trying something new. I don't know how it's going to be received. I have to just try it. And sometimes it's received really well. And sometimes it's like okay, that was a learning experience and I'm going to chalk that one up to learning. It sounds like what you're auctioning, collectibles are not really my area of expertise. I'm really more on the art side, but already from what you're describing it as, there's a lot of built-in.
It is like
interest.
an art collectible. It's like an art collectible. It is like art. It's like a mix of the two, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just knowing that it's Kobe Bryant, you know, there's this space is, there's a lot of interest in that. There's a lot of interest in sports and specifically basketball, and Kobe has his own following. And so I think there's also a degree of like, And it's a lesson I'm always learning is like, don't oversell, like trust that there is a degree of interest already, and learn to sniff out where it is. Learn to sniff out where you see people are already interested and just kind of like stoke that instead of just kind of throwing everything to the wind and hoping something sticks. Target who is already the audience for this.
Yes.
And one quick thing that I will add, obviously, because you are dealing with somebody who has passed on, that's where the big risk can come from, because particularly from a lot of people who aren't in the NFT space, there will be the type, potentially, the opinion that you are monetizing off of.
It's all going to his charity. Trust me. We're not monetizing that.
You focus on that
Yeah.
very much, because
we're on the same wavelength. We're on the same wavelength.
Great. Because a lot of people could turn around and say you're capitalizing off of that and you're doing it with a technology that is killing the earth. So just as a thing, make sure you have everything and you are
Understood.
very, very clear about where it is going and what is happening with it and where it's going to help, where the proceeds are going to potentially make a difference.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Simona and Sarah. Thank you. Yeah, the point of learning to sniff out where the interest is, and I guess to summarize, feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and then just learning from that. Very valuable.
Thank you, Mark, for the question. And I know we're 5 minutes over. Sarah, thank you so much for your time, and Simona for leading us through conversation. I'm sure that we'll have lots to discuss with you into the future, but it means a lot that you spent so much time with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was a really good talk. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.